Hello everyone and welcome back to Laser's Woodshop. Today I'm going to make a wall unit out of 1 3/4 solid oak. It's 106 inches wide and 23 inches deep, and the bookshelf section is 8 foot tall. I'm going to use oak plywood on the sides and back of the bookshelf as well as the bottoms of the drawers. Those sections are just too big to use solid wood. I've colored the plywood parts brown in my SketchUp drawing. The plan for this unit, as well as many others, is available on my website, laserswoodshop.com. Okay, let's get started. I'll start by ripping 2 wide slabs down to exactly 12 inches. I'll glue those 2 together, and this will be the base. After the glue sits for a couple hours, I'll scrape off the squeeze out on the top section. Next, I'll cut all the drawer parts to rough size and set those aside. I want to make sure everything comes out together correctly before I cut them to the exact size. So I'll come back to those later. Next, I cut all the shelf parts to rough length. Then put one side through the joiner to get a square edge. Then I'll cut the other side with a table saw to get a parallel edge. You see, these boards come from the lumberyard at slightly different widths, so I'm adjusting the fence after each cut. And my nephew's helping me here. Now I want to measure to make sure each panel is going to be more than 22.5 inches. At the same time, I'm matching the grain as best I can. I'll set these aside and mark them with tape so I don't forget what goes together. Now I'm ripping 4 more wide slabs to make the top and middle sections of the TV area. I'm going to call these the TV shelves. Again, I'm taking off as little as possible to make sure I have enough in the end. Next, I'll glue all the shelves. This is a shot of some of the bookshelves while the glue is drying. I'll use the same trick I used on the base to take off the glue squeeze out. After the glue dries overnight, I'll draw a square line on one edge of each shelf and use a straight edge to cut one end square. A few of these boards have large cracks and knots, so I'll stabilize those with some epoxy. Next, I'll cut all the shelves to their final width and length with the table saw. The epoxy dries overnight, then I'll use a chisel with the bevel down to remove the excess. I'm going to glue some scrap together with 2 square edges, and I'm going to leave about 1/8 of an inch proud of the top. This way I'll have a square reference edge when I cut these to size later. There's no glue between the second and third pieces here. These are too thick to cut on the table saw, so I'm going to use my miter saw. Using the square reference edge on the fence, I'm going to cut off one end, then I'm going to slice it to its final width. I'll cut the remaining 7 pieces using a stop block. Now I'm going to cut a bevel on all 4 sides of these, I'm not sure what the angle is going to be, but I know what the size of the top of each foot is going to be. I'll use some math in my combination square to make the marks on the top. Now I'll draw a line from the mark on the top to the bottom corner. I'll use my bevel gauge to find the angle and set the saw blade. Now I can line up the blade to make sure I'm cutting in the right spot, and I'll make a cut on all four sides. Now I'm going to move on to another part of the project. You'll see these feet again later. You might remember I glued a total of 6 wide panels to make the base and 2 TV shelves. Now I'll trim off the ends with a straight edge and my chop saw. Next, it's time for some power planing. After that, I'll turn my attention to the legs. When you weren't looking, I glued 2 pieces of 1 3/4 stock that were both 3.5 inches wide and roughly 20 inches long. Now I'll trim those to the final length of 19.5 inches. These are going to be the legs. The dados on these are made to fit 1 3/4 TV shelves. Therefore, they're going to be 1 3/4 deep and 1 3/4 wide. I did several test cuts before cutting the real thing here. I'll use a slightly different procedure for the middle dado. First, I make a cut on all 6 legs, setting the fence at 9 3/4 from the rightmost blade. Then I'll move the fence to the right 3/4 of an inch. Then I'll move the fence to the final distance, which is 11.5 inches from the leftmost blade. And I'll do a test just to make sure. After some staining, I'll glue on the feet. The square at the top of each foot is the same as the square of each leg. The challenge here is to get the feet directly below where the legs are going to go. I'll use a combination square to get these in the right spot. I definitely need another pair of hands, like an awesome sister, for this next bit. We flip over the base and detach the legs. Use the same combination square to get the legs in the same position as the feet. I'll attach all 3 legs in the back first. Then I'm going to glue and set the middle TV shelf in place. Then, while my sister is holding the middle TV shelf, we can put the front legs on. And we're going to clamp each as we go. Now we lift and set the top TV shelf in place. Clamps and some very heavy shelves will help while the glue dries. Now I'll turn my attention to the side of the bookshelf. First of all, it's better to make the dados on this before slicing it into 2 pieces. That way there's no question that the dados are going to line up. So I'm going to use a straight edge and my router with a bit that's exactly 1 3/4, and 1 pass for each dado is going to do the trick here. After the dados are complete, I'll cut the board into 2 pieces that are each 22 3/8. Then I'll cut a rabbet down the back of each side panel using a dado blade on the table saw. Now some more staining. Here I'm making the notches on each shelf to make room for the face frame. Next, I'll glue each shelf in place and then set the other side and clamp away. Now that the bookshelf is assembled, I can cut the drawers to the final width. I'm going to use locking rabbet joints to make these drawers. However, these are going to be made using all 3/4 inch stock, even the bottom. Most drawers nowadays are made with 1/2 inch stock, but if you follow these steps, you'll find it easy to make this joint with 3/4 inch stock. First, I'll set my dado blade thickness to 1/4 inch. Next, I'll use a 1/2 inch drill bit to set the height of the blade. Third, I'll use a 1/4 inch drill bit between the blade and the fence to set the distance. I'll do a test cut to make sure everything's okay, Then I'll cut a dado on both ends of all the side pieces. Next, I'll leave the fence exactly where it is, and I'll raise the blade to 3/4 of an inch using a piece of the same stock I'm cutting as a guide. I need to do this next cut on the fronts and backs with the pieces standing vertical on the saw. I'll do a test cut to make sure everything is set up correctly. Then I'll make a center cut by doing one pass, and I'll swing the piece around and make another cut. Since I didn't move the fence and the stock is 3/4 of an inch, it should already be centered, but this just makes sure. Now I'll flip the piece end over end and make the same cuts. I'll do this on all the fronts and backs of each drawer. Now I'm going to lower the blade so it only cuts the bottom tongue of the dado. I'm going to add an auxiliary fence and move the fence so that it's just barely touching the blade. Now I can make the final cuts on the fronts and backs. This locks the corners of the drawers together and hides the next cut that I'm about to make. So I'm going to change the blade to 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch drill bit to set the fence from the rightmost blade, and the same drill bit to set the height of the blade. Then I'm going to make a dado along the bottom of each piece. Now this next bit here is optional. I'm making a stop dado down the center of these drawers so I can insert a divider. Now I'm making a decorative curve at the top of each front, back, and middle piece. I'll do a test assembly, then I'll make a measurement of the inside length and inside width, and I'll add exactly 1/2 inch to each of those to account for the dados. Then I can cut all the bottoms. I'll do another test to make sure the bottoms are all good. And then I'm going to sand everything. Finally, I can glue these drawers and they're ready for some finish. Next, I'm going to make 2 grooves on the backs of each drawer. These are necessary to make way for the drawer slides. Be careful on the dado blade height here. I don't want to cut into the bottom of the drawer, just exactly level with it. Now I'm cutting the cleats I'll use to anchor the bookshelf to the base of the whole unit. And it's now time to glue the face frames on the bookshelf. Nothing tricky here, I'm just doing one side at a time because I don't have enough large clamps. Who does? Now I'll add the drawer slides to the bottom of each drawer. I'm going to use 2 blocks that are cut to the exact same length to make sure these are parallel. This only works because I know the drawers are square. Next, I'll attach the drawer slides to the base of the unit. After that, I'll finish the whole thing with a coat of shellac, and then I'm going to spray on 6 coats of lacquer. Now for the heavy lifting. Thank goodness for good friends. Even though the bookshelf and TV area are 2 separate pieces, each piece is very, very heavy. Well, this was very fun to build. Here's a couple of pics of it set in place. Thanks for watching. Just click to subscribe. Also, check out my website for plans and other videos.